Welcome to today's episode of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Today, I'm joined by the awesome Dr. Will Deyamport to talk about making the best use of your learning management system. We do a deep dive into some of the awesomeness that is Schoology, and then I also explore 4 cool tools for design thinking in the classroom. Let's get to it.
We're Erin and Dave Tashin, co-hosts of the Mindful Educators Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, welcome in. My name is Jake, and I'm here to talk to you about duct tape and educational technology and how the two fit together to form a goofy metaphor, but also an EdTech integration mindset that I believe can make the selection of tech tools for your learning environment a little bit less stressful. Speaking of stressful, though, man, educator life is stressful, isn't it? I mean, right now, yeah. I don't know about you, but I am limping into the coming winter break. If you're feeling the same, I wish I had some kind of magic advice to fix that for you, but I don't. Hopefully, those of you in the States will have a restful and joyful few days with family for Thanksgiving break here in a few days. And more importantly, a nice long winter break just a month away. In the meantime, I hope that you enjoy this episode, and I don't know, maybe it gives you some solace during this stressful school year and school life and profession that we're in. In terms of the podcast schedule, my goal is to release another episode the week after Thanksgiving. So that's like, I don't know, December 1st or 2nd or something around there. And then a bonus episode a week later and one more regular episode before Christmas. And then a little break until the first week of January. By the way, I'm running a contest for my newsletter subscribers. I plan to give away a few signed copies of my book, Educational Duct Tape, an EdTech Integration Mindset, to winners. If you want in, go read the most recent email. I either sent it the same day as this podcast aired or the day after. It always just depends on how quickly I get stuff done. But go read that email. Or if you don't already subscribe to my newsletter, first off, what are you doing? Come on, get with the program. And second off, go subscribe at jakemiller.net/newsletter. That's jakemiller.net/newsletter to get signed up for that email list so you get the details on how to enter to win one of those free copies of Educational Duct Tape and EdTech Integration Mindset. And you know what? I will do my best to get it to you in time for the holidays. So if you already have a copy, you could even use it as a gift. You know, I'm kind of like that kid in your class who is super willing to let his classmates copy his answers on your test. Wait, maybe that's not a good thing. But seriously, I put in the work to know as much as I can about educational technology. So why not give you the answers? Okay, don't give me a 0 and send me to the principal's office. Hear me out here. I'm not actually talking about cheating on tests. I'm talking about answering your questions. If you've got a question that you'd like me to address on the show, you could tweet it to me at JakeMillerTech, email it to me, jakemillertech@gmail.com, or submit it on the show's Flipgrid, flipgrid.com/eduducttape. Or submit it on the show's SpeakPipe page at speakpipe.com/eduducttape. However you do it, I'll pick 1 or 2 questions to ask at the tail end of each episode. Today, I've got a great one for you that I think you're really going to enjoy. And if you want to ask a question, remember, you could tweet it to me, direct message it, email it, Flipgrid it, SpeakPipe it. If you want to hear it in your own voice, use that Flipgrid or SpeakPipe option, or even send me an audio version in an email. Otherwise, if you send text, I'll have the immersive reader read it out loud for us. But the important part is, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, send it on in. I would love to address it on an upcoming episode.
Hi, my name is Beth, and I'm an instructional support specialist and a coach from Pennsylvania. I love Educational Duct Tape book because it provides me with some great innovative ways to use technology and ways that I can support the teachers and students that I work with in learning new ways to do so. And it's a very practical book with lots of great suggestions and things that I can implement right away.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. If you've ever seen me present virtually, you've probably noticed my collection of bobbleheads and Funko Pops and books behind me. But if you watch a video of me from 2 or more years ago, you'll just see a blank wall, maybe a lightly adorned bookcase, depending on when exactly the video is from, but nothing more than that bookcase. This is because when I started doing virtual presentations, I didn't have time for making my space fancy. I had time to prepare the presentation and deliver the presentation. That's it. And I barely had time for that. But as time went on, I found that I didn't need to prepare as much for my presentations. They were kind of already ready to go. And so I could devote some of that saved time to putting up some shelves and some decor. And as the number of virtual events increased over the last 20 months, the need to spruce up my space has become more urgent. So I had more time to do it and more of an urge to get it done. My space was functional before it was fancy. It had a desk, but not decorations. It had a chair, but not good lighting. It had a webcam, but not a great webcam. Then it had a bookshelf, but not one that looked quite right. And that's okay. If we've got to choose between functional and fancy, much to my daughter's disappointment, functional has to win every time. The same is true in my classroom, but I'm not talking about bulletin boards and cute decorations. I'm talking about pedagogy and curriculum. I'm in my second year of teaching 8th grade science, 3 if you count the one other year a decade ago, and I put the finishing touches on my lessons about 2 minutes before my students walk in the door, if at all. That means that I don't have time to make them fancy. They're on plain white slides. They don't always have student choice. There's not always differentiation, at least not to the level that I think there should be. There's not always award-winning instructional practices, but they're always functional. Just like my home office, computer before bobbleheads, desk before Funko Pops, chair before a book collection sorted by binding color. Seriously, that's how they're sorted. Functional before fancy. Most of us do it when we move into our houses. Make the house functional before worrying about making the house fancy. I do it when coaching my son's basketball teams. Sons, plural. One son who's 7 and one who's 12. But anyhow, I teach them the basics before teaching them elaborate plays. So why don't we give ourselves permission to do it with our lesson plans? Do I want all teachers to use PBL, UDL, RTI, differentiation, one-on-one conferencing, driving questions, audio feedback, peer feedback, student pacing, student choice, and hyperdocs? Yeah, that'd be great. Do I want all teachers to have a manageable workload? Yes, for sure. And unless you're in your 5th or 6th or 10th or 20th year of teaching the same curriculum, you cannot do both of those things. And that means a compromise must be made. And I believe that compromise should be functional before fancy. And that's what educational duct tape is all about. Focus on functional first, kind of like actual duct tape, right? Its goal is function, not fanciness. Align yourself with duct tape. What functions do you need to serve in your classroom? What are your problems, goals, and needs that you need to address? You could work on fancy later, but you've got to start with something functional. And sometimes you've got to prioritize some elements of functional over others. Goodness knows I have to do that in my classroom. There are things that I know would make my class function better if I did them, but I don't have the mental and time bandwidth to make them all happen. So why shouldn't you do it in your classroom? Be kind to yourself. Remind yourself that you can't do it all. So identify what's the most important thing for you to do now and start there. And I hope to be here for you to help you identify what tools you could use once you identify those functions.
Today's guest.
All right, today my guest is Will Deyamport, as seen on Forbes.com and Schoology. Dr. Will, as he is better known, is a district instructional technologist specializing in assisting educators in going digital. In this role, he delivers in-person and virtual training and coaching, designs and delivers online professional development courses, and live webinars for the teachers in grades K through 12. I know Dr. Will best as the host of the Dr. Will Show podcast and the tagline, the mobile university for edupreneurs. You can find Will on Twitter and Instagram at I am Dr. Will, and I'll put the link to that in the show notes, of course. But you don't need to go over to Twitter or Instagram right now to find him, because you can find him right here in the podcast. Welcome in, Will. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Jake, for bringing me on this morning.
Yeah, I'm psyched to have you. Like I said, I've been listening to the Dr. Will Show for years. I know it's been around for years. I always enjoy the podcast. I enjoy you have the best selection of guests, and I enjoy hearing the banter between you and them. So you've been on my list for quite a while to get on the show. I love the work you do over there.
Awesome.
I think you're one thing I want to point out about your podcast is that there are a lot of people out there in edupreneur world or educational Twitter or educational social media world who are they're not being real about maybe what the life of an educator is right now. There are some who are, some who aren't. It's all sunshine and rainbows for some people. Not that you're not a positive person, but I feel like you're, especially on your podcast, you're very real about the challenges that we have and talking about the things that educators go through and giving them permission to, maybe do a side job and things like that, whatever it might be. And I think I just love the realness on your show. And I was like, I want Dr. Will to be on Educational Duct Tape and bring that realness here. So I'm glad to have you.
All right. Hey, let's do this.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we're going to jump into it with a game. You ready for a game?
Yeah.
2 truths and 1 lie.
Nice. Okay, we're going to play a game of 2 truths and 1 lie. I'm going to ask you for 3 statements. You're going to give me 3 statements. 2 of them are going to be true about yourself, and 1 of them is going to be a lie about yourself. And I'm going to try to figure out which one is the lie. Are you up for that?
All righty.
Okay. All right. Whenever you're ready, give me 3 Dr. Will themed statements.
I have met Tupac.
All right.
I have been to most of the states on the northeast of the United States.
All right.
I have met Barack Obama.
Okay. All right. Tupac, Barack Obama, and most of the states in the northeast of America. Let's see. I'm gonna assume the Tupac thing is a lie, because that's a small window for you there. Because can you believe it has been like 25 years since Tupac passed away? I still remember where I was when I heard. It's been at least 25 years, maybe a little bit more than that, because it was 97 or so. So maybe it was maybe more like 23 or 24 years. So, but I'm going to guess that's the lie. You have not met Tupac.
That is the truth.
That's the truth? No way.
Yes.
How, when, where? We need details on that before we move on.
Tougaloo College.
Okay.
I attended Tougaloo College, and Tupac and Grand Poobah came to perform, and Tupac came out into the audience, and I was like, hey, I want to meet. He had his homies with him, and I was like, I want to, meet Tupac, and he came over, and I was like, hey, what up?
That is so cool. That is amazing. And I don't want to date you, Will, but when would that have been? That had to have been, I didn't listen to Grand Poobah, but I remember Grand Poobah. One of my friends was really into him. That had to have been like early 90s, right?
Yeah, like 93 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How cool. And that was probably too at the, like, he wasn't quite as astronomically famous at that point yet. That was probably a year or 2 before he like really took off. Like, because he was certainly popular at that time, but that was a little while before he became big, I think.
This was before the Death Row days.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's what that album's when he became big. People are listening right now like, Jake listened to rap? I didn't peg you as a rap music fan. And actually, I normally when I'm editing the podcast and preparing stuff on the podcast, it's late at night. I need something to keep me awake. That's what I turn to, is that 90s rap. So I'm a little bit jealous of you having met Pac. But okay, so the other ones are Barack Obama and the states on the northeast of America. And so I'm worried if you've been to the Northeast and you haven't visited me here in Ohio, Dr. Will. I'm now sending the invitation out. We're going to meet for dinner when you're in Ohio. But I think that's probably true. I think you have not met President Obama.
I have not met him.
And that's a dream, I'm sure. So who would you rather meet, President Obama or Oprah?
Wow.
Because I know you can tell I'm a listener to the Dr. Will show referencing Oprah, right?
Wow. Both would be all time amazing.
Right.
To do so. But I think I would want to meet Oprah because Oprah could get me the invite to Barack.
Oh, she's the connection. Once you meet Oprah, she could hook you up with meeting President Obama. You're like the guy who gets a genie and wishes for more wishes. You're strategizing here.
Yeah. Because I love to talk about her, of course, about how she built her empire and how she keeps her money focused. Right. So I would love to do that. But then go, hey, especially if she was like, yo, this is a great conversation, great meeting you. I said, hey, you think you could hook me up with an interview with President Barack Obama? That'd be awesome. Holler at me, I would definitely ask.
That was a good way to parlay that. I think that's a good plan. I didn't realize how into like podcasting and stuff Oprah was, that she is still what seems like a voracious reader. Everybody knows she's got the book club and everything, but she also is a podcaster. And I listened to one of her interviews recently. It was with Malcolm Gladwell, and it was so cool hearing her in that medium, because she still is very much into it. And hearing her thoughts about one of the books that he had written was like, I'm like, Oprah really, really reads, like she's not one of these famous people who are just like kind of sitting back and, counting the money and enjoying their mansions. Like she is still like into it and a voracious reader and thinker and all that kind of stuff. Isn't that interesting?
It is. I mean, she's doing what she loves to do.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. For those of you who don't listen to Dr. Will's show, what's the line at the beginning? Everybody's got to share it out there because you want to be on Oprah someday or have Oprah on someday. Is that what it is?
Yeah. I tell people, to share it because I'm trying to grow on Apple Podcasts and I'm trying to get Oprah on the show.
Well, so Oprah, if you're listening, I'm not sure if she's an educational duct tape listener, but if she is, I'm sure she'll hit you up after this. And then you know what you could do when you meet her, you could slip her a copy of your movie, The Edupreneur. Pass her off a DVD or something.
Show it on OWN.
Right. So there's for those of you who don't know about that too, Dr. Will did a movie, the only movie I know of its type about the life of an edupreneur. And I actually haven't seen it, I have to admit. So I'm going to be clicking that link that I'm putting in the show notes. I've watched the trailer for it, and I've seen the list of people who were in it, and I'm really intrigued to hear about it. What's in it, or to see more of it. But a great group of people talking about the life of being, an educational technology or educational speaker or blogger or podcaster, or to use education as a source of income or as a career, and kind of what goes into that process. And so there's a link to that in the show notes. Is video making like a big passion of yours beyond something like podcasting? Is that why you went video with that?
Well, I went to film school.
I see.
And it literally came about because I'd interviewed Dr. Sarah on the podcast. And after the interview, we were just kind of, chit-chatting. And I was like, yo, I would love to work with you, but I don't have a book in me.
Right.
And she said, well, you could do a documentary. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, you're already doing these podcast interviews, right? So you could just interview people and we could connect their interviews together to create a story.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm in on this.
Right.
And that's how the idea of creating a documentary was born. And then from there, I went to sort of put together my proposal. Now, at first, I was going to do the technology one-to-one type thing. And I was like, yo, I can't do this. I don't have this in me. I'm bored.
You mean as a theme for the movie? That's what you're going to go with at first?
As a theme for the movie. I said, yo, I'm done. I'm bored. At the time I was getting ready to be done at work. I was just like, I need to do something different. And the whole entrepreneur thing, particularly because I had been talking about it on my podcast, I was like, yo, this is the story that I need to, I have to tell this story.
Yeah.
And I had a certain lineup in mind, and they all said yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, let's do this. And so it was awesome. I knew I had something special that first interview, because I interviewed Angela Myers.
Mm-hmm.
And she had made a comment of hurting her back and having surgery, and how her recovery time meant she wasn't on the road. And how was she going to make that money up? And I was like, oh, these people are sharing some stuff.
Yeah, right.
And
you don't
from there, it just went on. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it's, like you said, Angela Myers, former guest on my podcast, Caitlin Tucker, Jeff Bradbury, Tom Murray, Eric Scheninger, lots of, multiple people who have a lot of expertise in that area. So I'm going to go click. There's a rent button right here. I'm going to rent it, and then I'm going to regret it and wish I had just watched it, just kept it, so I could watch it more than 48 hours. So that I'm going to end up buying it. So you're going to get a rental from me and a purchase, I bet, Will, is what's going to happen.
I appreciate the support.
Yeah. And we got a link in the show notes for everybody else to check it out. Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, we're going to jump into some educational duct tape then, Will. So I got a question for you. So for those people who might be new listeners to the show, we're going to do an educational duct tape question, which is my question that sees educational technology as a tool that we use in our learning environment. So it's not the goal, it's not the focus, it's the tool that we use. So first comes our pedagogy, or our goals for our students, or our content standards, or a problem we're trying to solve in our classroom. And then, like duct tape, we identify a tool that can help us out with that. So our educational technology will be our tool. And one of my favorite things to do in the classes that I've taught in the past, and the science class that I teach now, and the technology classes I teach now, is to think about how I don't think all students should necessarily move through a curriculum at the same pace. Like, we know not all kids learn at the same order. So I like to build a curriculum within, whether it's a learning management system or an online platform. I like to build a curriculum that gives them the ability to kind of move through at their own pace. And it takes me away from the front of the classroom. It lets me be in the classroom with my students, because the curriculum is in the learning management system. It doesn't mean there's not times that I'm at the front of the classroom, but the focus is on the students and their learning, and that curriculum that's then in the LMS. So my question to you is, how can I build my curriculum in my LMS? How would you do that?
Well, first, I say you need to look at what your district has for your curriculum, because that is going to pretty much be the bulk of your content. And then understand that you need to chunk your material, that this is not a bail to bail situation. And then understand that you then have to create some activities for students to where they are creating and not just typing in the PDF, not just watching videos, not just consuming consumables that your district purchased.
Right. We want creators, not consumers. We want consuming sometimes, right? But we want more creating in there too. I agree.
Yeah, it's going to happen. But, what teachers have to understand, and this is, an uphill battle for me, even in the work that I do for some teachers in the district, is I'm trying to get them to understand that the way you were taught, the way you learned, even the district curriculum that we have purchased does not align with the students we have. We have students who were born into a digital world.
Right.
They don't know what it is to have to sit and wait for your favorite TV show and to sit through commercials.
Right.
They don't know what it means to go to Blockbuster or call ahead and say, "Yo, Frank, this is Will. Save me that copy."
Right.
They live on demand.
Right.
They live streaming on any device. We have students in our district who may not have a traditional laptop or desktop, but they'll have a smartphone or they'll have a tablet.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a device with them pretty much wherever they go. And they're using those devices, some for good, some for not so good, but they're using those devices to create. And even how they see the world is so different. Like, I'm 47 years old. There are people on Twitter that I'm real cool with. But if I have not met you offline and had certain experiences with you offline, we're just cool.
Right.
I'm not going to be like, yo, this is my buddy, my friend forever. But we have kids that the people they meet online are like real.
Right.
To them, and real to them in a way, for me as an adult, because to me, a relationship, I put a certain definition to a relationship at 47 that at 17 people don't have.
Right.
And these people are like, yo, this is my homie. This is my real life homie. And they're playing video games with people from all over the world, and they're collaborating in these video games. They're doing these things. I'm like, again, I'm 47. I had a ColecoVision that had an Atari adapter. So I played that in Atari games. Your collaboration was a dude sitting next to you.
Right. On
right. Or people in the room like, yeah, man, do this, do that. It was no, I'm playing a game with a headset with someone in France.
Right.
So their whole experience being connected is far different. And then we take those kids, we put them in the classroom in rows, and we talk to them to death.
Yeah.
Teachers need to understand that is not how to reach these students.
Right. Because being like the same way we did it before encourages compliance, right? And we know that compliance will only get us so far. We'll only get our students so far. It might get us a calm, quiet classroom where all the boxes get checked, but does it do what we need it to do for the student? If you're only doing it like kind of compliance based sit and get model, then you're focusing on not all of the things that your students need out of their education, right? If your only measurement of your students is content standards and tests, then you're not measuring all the things that they deserve to get out of their schooling.
Yes, and that's an issue for far too many schools, especially Title I schools, because they have their own challenges, right? So they tend to focus on test scores and graduation rates.
That's the bar that's been set for them, right?
They got, if they're doing that well, they're like, hey, we're awesome. They could be receiving awards from that, versus, let's say, a wealthier school district in Massachusetts. Let's say Newton. Those schools in Newton, they don't care about graduation rates. They know their students are going to graduate. They don't care about test scores either. Their focus is on how many of our kids go to certain colleges, right? So they teach a different way. Because they're preparing their kids for Harvard, Boston, Mass, Boston University, Boston College, Suffolk, MIT. So the way they approach how they teach is different. They have a different type of rigor, a different type of expectation, a different way of what is this work going to look like in the classroom. They don't care about the other stuff. And you can see, you can even see it in sports teams. Those teams who, for them, it's Super Bowl or we failed, they play the game differently. They prepare for the game differently. Their mentality is different versus those teams where they don't. You'll have a team, they'll win a game and they'll be partying like they won something, but you just won a game, right? That's a totally different mentality in how you approach what you do. And schools have to start approaching what they do with our students, in my opinion, of not only preparing them for the next level of education, secondary options, but preparing them for the world of work, which I can only assume will continue to be more remote options or hybrid. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to go back to everyone showing up at the same time in person. I think the world has accelerated, technology accelerated a transformation that would have probably taken us maybe another 10 years to get to that point.
Right.
But now, I mean, it is phenomenal. I mean, I can't tell you how awesome it is for me to get on Instacart and go grocery shopping now.
Right.
And so that's the world our students live in. And we need, when people talk about meeting students where they are, normally they're talking about Lexile levels, right? Or if they've taken some sort of standard mastery and that student has deficits in these standards, we're going to go there. But they don't think about meeting kids where they are in terms of these kids live in a digital world. Mm-hmm. How can we meet them there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the kind of model that we grew up in our classrooms prepared us, and especially our parents, in those days when they were in school, prepared them and prepared us for the types of careers that were available at those times. But as you're saying, the careers are changing and the workforce is changing and the way work is done is changing. And so if we do all sit and get, like you're saying, then we're not well preparing our students for their futures. If we're not doing those kinds of projects, like you said, where they're doing that creative journaling, where sure, it's still writing, but they're using their creative thinking skills, or that poster making where they're using their graphic design skills, or that podcast recording where they're getting their voice out there and learning how to use a different piece of technology, right? That's kind of stuff prepares them for the kind of careers that they may be going into, right? So in your ideal classroom, how do you kind of package all of this kind of work, this kind of media rich, task rich, student creativity rich stuff, along with regular content? How do you package that into an LMS? What do you use and how do you do it?
Well, first I start with organization. So you don't just throw stuff in there. I mean, your LMS is a digital classroom, not a closet. Mm-hmm. So you don't just throw stuff in there. And so what I do with our teachers is I start out with saying, let's go with week 1, week 2, week 3, whatever, and we're going to date it. And then inside of that, we're going to click on that, and then that's going to take you to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, then you're going to date that. Now, when you click on Monday, how you put that in there in terms of, is that going to be Unit 1? Is that going to be, this ready lesson or what have you? That is entirely, up to you. But I do want to see your lesson line, right? And so normally when you talk about online learning and you can look at all of these different models like Addy and Dick, Carey and such. I just stay away from those because those can be sort of cumbersome. And what I'm trying to do is remove the awe of technology from teachers, right? I don't want them to become overwhelmed by it. So I stick to something that they know, gradual release, right? That's how we teach. And a lot of school districts do that. So you understand what that looks like in terms of the lesson line. And so that's when we go, okay, we're going to go to our bell ringer. Let's then, we're looking at Schoology right now. That's what we use. Let's go to our assessment tab where we can now create a bell ringer. And then your direct instruction, if you're going to be in a face-to-face environment, of course, that's going to be done via class. But I always encourage my teachers to make their own videos. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, I say, can you go to Khan Academy? Yes. Can you go to YouTube? Yes. But you don't own those videos. Right. And even though you put it in Schoology today, someone can take that video down and you won't be able to use it. Mm-hmm. And one of the beautiful things about Schoology is being able to, at the end of the year, save your entire course and to bring it over to your resources. And then in the fall, you just create a new course and you bring all of that content back. Well, when you don't own the content, then what you do at that point? So another bonus piece of creating your own video is you are teaching in the normal way that you would normally teach, which is great for your students because guess what? They get to watch that tutorial and hear you and see you and watch you do it the same way you do it in the classroom. So it is better for them. It is also great for parents who may need that help themselves to help their children.
Right.
Look, I have observed classrooms and I have gone in and saw some of that new math. Hey, I would need a video myself.
Right. I always, the new math stuff I always get frustrated about because the parents are bashing it. But yet I was at a high school football game last night and ordered stuff from the concession stand that had a total cost of $8.50. It was like, this was $4, this was $2, this was $2.50. And this mom who was volunteering pulled out her cell phone to use her calculator to figure out that it was $8.50 total. And my 10-year-old standing next to me, like looking at the woman, like, are you kidding me right now? And so they don't even realize that we need to do math. But you're right. If we don't have those videos, the parents don't understand it. And then it just becomes something confusing. But with the videos, there's a chance for the parents to be able to watch the teacher and see the teacher and their way of explaining it. So they could support their kids the way that they would, the way the teacher would, right?
They for sure. And those videos can also be used for additional support for kids to go back and watch as many times as they need to, right? So you have that. Now we're going into our guided practice. Now, this is where you as the school district, get to use that PDF document that they have paid for in terms of their curriculum.
Right.
And what we do in our district is, of course, we use Kami, which I know a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it allows the teacher to doing guided practice. That is the we do piece, right? Students and teachers working together. And so as a teacher is doing, the student is doing, and what I love about that interactive piece is with Kami, a teacher can actually share that document with students and have them actually work together inside of the document, which is also great for if you're going to be doing different rotations in terms of blended learning. And so you have that for your guided practice, which for a lot of teachers, that's going to be very comforting for them because it's going to be something that they're very used to. So I'm not really taking them so much out of their comfort zone. But when it comes to the independent practice, the one thing I will really like to stress to our teachers, okay, I know we have a curriculum and I know we have certain expectations. Okay, cool. But I'm going to need you to not PDF these kids to death. So it's okay to sprinkle in these PDFs. Mm-hmm. Cool. I know, again, I know what we're working under. I said, but this is a great time is to take that content and again, reimagine it, to have kids do stuff. So if you're looking at this content, you're looking at your standard and your standard is talking about key main ideas. You can have your students, what if your students did sort of, they created a YouTube channel where they were book reviewers, right?
Yeah.
And instead of them on that PDF writing out these key main ideas, you're giving them a story,
right?
And they're just doing a review of it and making sure that they point out the main idea and the key details.
Right. You give them kind of a rubric or a list of things to make sure they do in there, some boxes to check while they're going through it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And
again, those students are going to remember that far more than here's a workbook page.
Mm-hmm. Well, for multiple reasons. One, it's going to be more fun.
Yes.
And the second, they're going to have some autonomy in it, right? They're going to have some choice over how they do it. And that's going to build in some engagement that's going to lead to that learning that sticks with them for longer.
Oh, for sure. And that's what I try to tell teachers is that your students have to make sense of this and make meaning of what they're learning. Mm-hmm. They have to make a connection with what they're learning. If they don't, retention and learning, and particularly when you're talking about skills that need to build on other skills, for them to be successful later on. That is not a sit and get, regurgitate, recall situation. Mm-hmm. That is about them. At that point, we're literally talking about DLK 3, DLK 4, because kids have to be able to synthesize that information and take it to the next level. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely the things that I stress about when we're talking about independent practice. Yes, there are going to be times where you're going to take that PDF from our curriculum. Yes, there are going to be certain times you're going to, you may put that worksheet in there. I get that. But we have to make sure that we give students other opportunities to extend their learning beyond that sit and get, to show them how these tools can be a force of good, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. I think we also need to do too in terms of digital citizenship, so that students understand the difference between that and getting on Instagram and doing some stuff that can get them in some trouble or getting that scholarship revoked. So I really think that is how you start to build your digital curriculum, is going with what going with a process that about in terms of gradual release, but then making sure that it is built for an online environment, and not saying, I'm going to take everything I did face to face, I'm just going to put it online, and I'm going to walk away. And that's some things I tell teachers, like, be very judicious, chunk your material, and don't just go throwing everything in there, because they're going to look at you like you need to be drug tested, because it's not going to happen.
Right. One thing I loved that you said right there was, at the end there was, when you were talking about, don't just take what you do in the online face-to-face classroom, the traditional classroom, and put it online and then walk away. I think, and then walk away is the most important part of that statement, because I'm a big believer in that we can't expect ourselves for our curriculum or our classroom or our activities or our instruction to be perfect the first time we do it, or even the second time we do it, or probably the third time we do it. But I'm a believer of getting something out there in a way that you are currently comfortable with, maybe changing the delivery to online, but using it in a way that maybe is comfortable to you right now, and then reflecting on it and then improving it as you go. Right. So the idea of something like gradual release is nice, because it's a framework that if the teacher's already familiar with it or using it, or if they're not, it's a relatively simple framework. They can then start using that framework digitally and then reflect on it as they go. Sometimes we just need to get that idea out there, and then we could tweak it as we go through it. And like you said, we could do that assessment that maybe doesn't have the video in it and go like, oh gosh, it would have been great if I actually heard this directly from the student. And then we add the video in, and then, oh wow, it would have been great if I would have given some better instructions for this. And then we record that video. And then it's, oh, well, I really wish I could have seen them practice this task, and then I could add in some Cami, right? And again, level it up as we go through it. Does that make sense?
That's one thing I'm really working with teachers in our district to get them to understand there has to be a shift in mindset about your approach to teaching and learning, your role in teaching and learning, and how are you approaching what you do with your students. Like if it's all about you being, as they say, the sage on the stage, then we have problems. I have problems with that, because you're working harder than your students, and I truly believe that if you're working harder than your students, then you're doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, I sometimes say the one doing the work is the one doing the learning, or the one using the technology is the one doing the learning. Like, we need to put as much of this onto their plate as possible, because that's what prepares them, for getting out there. Yeah. So you mentioned that you use Schoology for this, and so let's dive into, because I know it's unfortunate how few educators are familiar with Schoology. It does not have as wide of usage as other tools do. And I used to use Schoology in my district that I'm in, and I at first was not into the idea because I wanted to be using Google Classroom, which I like Google Classroom too, but we started using Schoology and I was really wowed by some of the stuff you could do in there. I think the literally the only downside of Schoology to me is that it's very complex. Well, not very complex, but there's just a lot of stuff in there. And it makes it a little bit intimidating, but I think the reason that's the case is just because it does so many things that the other platforms don't, right? Mm-hmm. So you mentioned assessment. So before we dive into some of the other things it does, so let's look at assessment. So you mentioned that you could ask questions in there. Students could respond with audio. Students can respond with video. What other kind of stuff could you build into an assessment in Schoology?
Of course, you have your multiple choice. You fill in the blank. You have drop down, drag and drop, label an image, which is even awesome for when I meet with first grade teachers. And I'm like, you have to study parts of a flower.
Right.
So you can put a picture of a flower there and have students select. It's sort of like a drag and drop feature, but you're actually, as a student, identifying the parts of the flower. Mm-hmm. So, and then that's great for maps as well. So you have that, you have essay, and you have your math tools there as well. And so off the gate,
right,
and comparing that to Google Classroom, you have a more robust type of options in terms of your assessment.
Right. I mean, Google Classroom doesn't have assessment. Truthfully, I mean, it's got forms kind of works really well in there, but the levels of questions that you can ask in forms is nowhere near what you could do in Schoology. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to all of the question types that are in Schoology, and you hit on most of them, but there are a few more there. And I really think that if you so last year, when we were all digital, I was looking for an assessment tool to use digitally while my students were at home. And I was kind of evaluating some of the tools that are out there. And, there's Edulastic and there's EdSite and there's, all these other tools where you could build an assessment online. And I think that Schoology rivals them in assessment quality, but Schoology is not just an assessment tool. Schoology does so much more. It's an entire LMS. And most of these things that you're mentioning, you could do in the free version, right? Like you don't need a paid school account to do those things, right?
A lot of those you can.
Yeah.
But there's different things. Like, let's say, for example, you have different options of Google Drive assignments. You have Kami assignments that you can do, which is awesome. You have the ability to set any piece of instruction to a standard, right? So whether it be that bell ringer or another type of formative assessment, or even if you're going to be doing a summative assessment, each question could be set to a particular standard. And Schoology allows you to pull a mastery report from that. Now, that mastery report will not only be of the entire class, but that mastery report will be for each individual student. So you as a teacher can go in and go back and say, okay, these 5 students are having deficits in standard, R AL.53, for example. Just throwing something out there. I just made something up. It could even
that's my favorite standard, Will.
Yeah, just put it out there, right? So you look at that right there. You're looking at what kids are seeing, but then you can go back into Schoology, and what can you do now? You can do something called individually assign, right? So you can individually assign students work to help scaffold back to fill in gaps. You can also individually assign to accelerate certain students. And if you're talking about groups of kids, you can create folders in Schoology in which you can individually assign work to them as well. And you can also use that folder option for blended learning purposes. So if you're going to say, I'm going to have these different stations, you can actually create the different stations in Schoology using that individually assigned function for the folders.
Right. I love that. That's what I love in Schoology is that folder organizational structure, because in Google Classroom, which is what I use now in my current classrooms, I can organize things by topic, and I organize them by week, kind of how you were saying earlier. And I put a date on them, and I put them in order, and I use emojis so the kids know what kind of assignments they are. And it works, and we're getting by with it. But the folder structure in Schoology is huge. And something I like too in there is, you were mentioning the individually assigning, and that's something you could do in Google Classroom, but in Schoology, you could actually design certain groups of kids. So you could say, during this unit, these are my kids that maybe performed low on a pre-assessment or performed high on a pre-assessment. And you don't have to then click all 6 of those kids every time you assign something. You can go like, I want this group, because you've just made them as a group in that classroom and assign them to them in that way,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I like with that mastery report, the cool thing there is you're kind of straddling both areas of what we talked about earlier, where we're kind of recognizing and admitting that these standards and maybe the test scores that go along with them is just part of our world. And so we need to make sure that our students are mastering these different standards. And this makes it easier to do that, more efficient to do that. But within the tool you're using, the questions you're asking could involve the students recording video, or could involve the students recording audio, or could involve the students making something creatively. And then in the platform, they could be submitting Google Drive files. They could be submitting, I don't know what other tools in there, but maybe a Canva or maybe an Adobe Spark or whatever it might be. Actually, submit a link to anything in there. So you're doing kind of both things, where you're admitting and understanding that the standards and the test scores and identifying who's mastering the standards is important, but also bringing in that future ready kind of stuff where they're doing things that really relate to the kind of career they'll have someday, which might involve video, might involve audio, might involve creativity, and involves this kind of digital organization and things like that. So they're getting kind of both ends of what's beneficial for them or what we need to get to them.
Also in Schoology, how in your resources, you can create these collections, as they're called, to where you as teams work together to build out course content. So you as a teacher don't have to do it all alone.
Mm-hmm.
So you can create test banks. You can also just, again, within that folder structure, we're going to have a reading folder, and all of us are going to create assignments and assessments in this reading folder. And you just take from it what you want. At our elementary school, the math team has been doing this for years.
Right.
And so the content is so rich, when a new teacher comes in, they're not starting from scratch.
Right.
They're being added to the group. That content is there. It is amazing. And the ecosystem of it, that's what I love about it, is our entire district is connected yet separate. So from the district level, I can send out messages and content and information to the entire district. And anyone at the district level can do so. Mm-hmm. But each school is its own entity, where the principal, the guidance counselor, can send out messages throughout the entire school, the librarian. Yeah. Teachers who oversee clubs, again, they send out announcements through Schoology as well. So you're not clogging up email, doing this. Kids log in, they see it all day. That information is right there. They can get home, get on Schoology with their phones, because I know they love to do that. I even had a kid reach out to me about this. What's my login for my phone? Because I like using Schoology on my phone because we have single sign-on on a device. Mm-hmm. So it's just the complete ecosystem of how you can take your school district digitally.
Yeah.
With this job that I do, and which other people who have my job, there's a lot of different challenges. And, many of us who may be involved in the Twitter world and love the ISTE and all of that stuff, we want to remake public education. And I'm for sure really want to do that, right? But I understand in the job that I do, and it's frustrating that most of people aren't there. So I have to find my wins and work with teachers, again, meet them where they are, and try to find ways in which I can do something for them where they can start to go, oh, okay.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I like about it in Schoology is that, in a tool like Google Classroom, or I don't use Microsoft Teams much, but maybe in Microsoft Teams, I have to, especially in Classroom, I have to, make my assessments here in forms, and I have to communicate with the students. I have to jump over to my email here. And then we're like, why aren't they checking their email? And then to share resources with another teacher, I have to go like, well, maybe we could have a classroom that we could share in, or maybe we just have a drive folder. But Schoology kind of does all of that, right? The kids don't have to check their email. It's there in Schoology, right? The parents even don't necessarily, if you use it with parents, don't have to go to this other site to look at grades. They go right there in Schoology. And your teachers collaborate in Schoology, like you're saying with those test banks and things like that. Like it's all in there in that environment. And I think that's what overwhelms some people about it. But once you get in there and learn about it, it's all there. Like it's all in one place, and it kind of streamlines everything for you, which makes it a really, really powerful tool for schools, I think, to use.
It is. It is so amazing and so awesome. And it's also helpful for school districts where, let's just say, teacher X is gone for 6 weeks for maternity leave.
Yeah.
With Schoology, a principal can give that course to another teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with Google Classroom.
Right.
The teacher who created that course has to add somebody, because even tech people can't break into that class,
right?
Which is terrible. So the fact that you can have that type of collaboration, that type of access, that type of way of keeping things moving,
right,
is, amazing to me. So
that's the thing that's nice about it as a tool, is that you select the strategy that works right for you. You use the tool that works right for you, whether it's something built in like the video in Schoology or video conferencing with Big Blue Button, or something that's outside of it, whether it's, say, Screencastify or Zoom. And then Schoology lets you do it either inside of their tool or bring in things from outside of the tool the way another platform would work. So it's nice that it's got everything you need inside, but also it lets other things come in too, whether it's links or uploaded things, stuff like that. So for the people listening, if you're like, maybe I need to check out Schoology, there's a lot of stuff in here. It seems a little overwhelming. I know the guy you need to call for some PD. Am I right, Dr. Will? Are you the guy?
Yeah, I am.
You are for sure. So, Will, thank you so much for being with us here today. And folks, seriously, if you're considering Schoology, you got to check out I Am Dr. Will on Twitter and Instagram. Reach out to him. He is your guy on Schoology. It's a great platform, and he knows it. But you could tell also from the other things you're throwing around with the Cami and the Jamboard and the Flipgrid and all that other stuff that you've got some expertise in educational technology across a lot of different platforms. So I'm so glad to have had your expertise on the show and get to share it with other people. So thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Will.
Well, thank you, Jake. I appreciate you inviting me.
I have a confession to make. I love listening to Dr. Will talk. If he did voiceovers for commercials, I'd buy whatever he was selling. And it doesn't hurt that when he's doing metaphorical commercials for ed tech, he's got the knowledge to back it up. We probably should buy whatever Dr. Will is selling. Let's review some of that ed tech goodness that Will was selling today. So he reminded us to focus on using what our schools and districts already have. He suggested that we chunk material within our LMS and that we bring in creativity and don't just digitize worksheets and post videos. I will throw a note in here, though. You might want to jump back to this 5-minute mark of this podcast and hear my feelings on functional versus fancy. Sometimes the best we could do with the time we have might be a digital worksheet or a video. That's functional, and I'm sure Dr. Will would agree. Sometimes that's all you could do. But you've got to realize that when you do have time to circle back and kick that lesson up a notch, doing more creative things is not only more fancy, but probably more functional too, because it yields better results. Will also reminded us that our students live on demand and that deeper learning doesn't come from sit and get. I liked what he said about LMS organization too. Your LMS is a digital classroom, not a digital closet, right? I love that advice there. He also shared some of the great Schoology features like their assessments and all that they include, video, audio, drag and drop, and so much more. And I will put a link in the show notes to all of the assessment question types in Schoology. Some of the other Schoology things that we discussed are the ability to record video, the ability to post Google Drive assignments that work similarly to how Google Classroom works, the available mastery reports that are organized by standards, the way that we can individually assign or create groups to assign to. And don't sleep on that groups part. It makes differentiation much quicker when you have a predictable group of students that are going to receive some sort of differentiation, whether it's based on a recent formative assessment score or something else that you've identified as a differentiation need. Having that group in there makes it a little bit more efficient for you. He also shared about the folder organization system in Schoology. Tremendous organization capabilities in there. He also shared about some of the resources like test banks and content shared between teachers. We talked about how it can also be used school-wide or district-wide or for clubs and sports, something that if you tried that in something like Google Classroom, I mean, I guess there's ways to do that, but they're very clunky, whereas Schoology is kind of built for that additional functionality. Dr. Will also mentioned the built-in video conferencing with Big Blue Button. Just so much good stuff, so much wisdom, and such a fun conversation. Up next, let's jump into the celebration of the adjacent possible.
Hi, I'm Sarah Frumhold. I am a digital learning coach in Frisco, Texas, and I really enjoy Jake's book because all of his stories that he tells on the podcast now are in book form, and I can have them at my fingertips at any time to share with teachers. Great job, Jake.
Last but certainly not least, time for my favorite part of the show, which is the celebration of the adjacent possible. As I've mentioned before, adjacent possible is the idea that whatever you do, whatever you try, whoever you talk to, whoever you listen to, wherever you go, opens you up to new adjacent possibilities. Things that are possible for you that are right next to, just beyond where you currently are right now. They are adjacent possibilities. They are adjacent to what you're already doing. And these connections and discussions between me and me and the guests, and you, between duct tapers, between educators, those open up all of our adjacent possibilities. All right, our adjacent possible question for today comes from a guy named Ryan Koop at rkoop, Koop7 on Twitter. That's at rkoop7 on Twitter. And he said, actually, he typed it and then the immersive reader read it for us, but his text said,
anyone know of a game that gets students thinking and participating in design thinking?
And so I really enjoyed this question because I had one answer that I was really confident in, but I didn't have even a runner-up. I didn't know anything else other than my one answer that I felt really good about and still feel really good about, but I didn't have any other ideas. So it was cool because he asked this question on Twitter, he tagged me and he tagged a few other people and kind of put it out there into the echoverse of Twitter and got my answer, but then got a handful of other answers, which means I got to learn from it too, which is adjacent possible in itself right there, right? So I immediately responded by sharing past educational duct tape guest Dee Lanier's project titled Solve in Time. And I'm going to quote the Solve in Time site here. It says, "This is a problem-based learning and design thinking activity. The goal is to creatively explain a solution to a relevant, real-world problem within a set time limit. Up to 6 teams of 2 to 4 people can play using a single deck of cards and can be facilitated live or virtually, low-tech or high-tech. Pick the problem. Let's solve it." And by the way, there's even an equity version of Solve in Time. Really great product, Solve in Time. You should check it out. And there's a link in the show notes. But the beauty of the adjacent possible is I shared that answer, which I feel really good about. And then there were 3 other answers, which I also now feel really good about, but at that point in time had not heard of. So Chris Woods, who is at Daily STEM on Twitter, and you should follow Chris if you don't already, lots of great ideas about STEM and design thinking and maker education and things like that. He shared 2 things. First, he shared the game, The Extraordinaires Design Studio, and you can find that at extraordinaires.com, and the link is in the show notes. I had never seen this one before. I love it. Their site says, stretch your imagination as you design and invent things for extraordinary characters with extraordinary needs, like a giant who needs a place to learn, or a pirate who wants a timekeeper. So these are cool little kits where students end up with one of these fun challenges and then sketch a plan for their design. You get character cards, that's where the giant and the pirate come from, and project cards, that's where the place to learn and the timekeeper comes from, and you combine them together to create your challenge, and then you get think cards to spark your thinking or your design process. And then it comes with an idea pad or an idea pad and a pen and a case for creating your designs. I think Santa might be bringing this for one of the Miller kids because I think this is a really cool kit. You can see very, very good design thinking stuff here, but different from what you're doing in Solve in Time. So there's room in classrooms for both of these things, and there's different situations where you might prefer one over the other. There's not a better one here. They're just different. Chris also shared another site, which also is different from these two, called Protobot, and the website is protobot.org. Proto like prototype, bot like robot. And this is a great site for design thinking starters for kids. So the site generates random product and service ideas. And I opened it up and the site said, design a token of love that teaches you something about politics. Let's actually stay away from politics. So I clicked randomize. There's a randomize button on the screen. And then I got design a wine glass that is very hygienic. Well, that sounds better, but maybe more kid appropriate and not a wine glass. So I clicked randomize again and I got design a swimsuit that is very comfortable. This is a cool site. Go check it out. You just click the randomize button and it gives you another one. And then you could use the kind of the situations that you use in Solve in Time or in The Extraordinaires, kind of similar to those, to go through a design thinking process. But they're really just great conversation starters to kind of kick them into that design thinking mindset. These good like starters to think through it. By the way, Chris credited both of those ideas to Jason Hubbard, who is at JSN Hubbard on Twitter. He said that he made him aware of both of these tools. So shout out to Jason and Chris for sharing these two tools. Ryan, who originally asked the question, said that he did a little bit of research and he found a site, or a tool, I should say, a card-based game called Disrupt Us, like the word disrupt and then US. And this game encourages innovation by making you look at objects in new ways. So you have a card that you're given, you roll a die, and that the results of when you roll those dice thrusts you into disruptive thinking, which asks you to look at an object or a process or an idea and come up with a new way to achieve its purpose, or a better way to achieve its purpose, or a more efficient way to choose its purpose, or maybe to visualize an entirely new purpose for that object or process or idea. And again, a fourth and different thing. These are all kind of related, but different. So all four of those are really cool and really different. And I could see reasons that you might want to choose any of those four options, or even more than one of those four options. Got another idea? Respond to the tweet from Ryan and let us know. I'll put a link in the show notes, and I'll check back to that tweet before recording our next episode, and I'll see if you shared anything, and if you did, I will mention it in that episode. If you've got a question, tweet it to me at Jake Miller Tech. Email it to me, jakemillertech@gmail.com. Submit it on the show's Flipgrid, flipgrid.com/edu duct tape, or record a message on my SpeakPipe page, speakpipe.com/edu duct tape. Those links, of course, are also in the show notes. I can't wait to hear your questions. All right, and finally, before we wrap up, everybody's favorite part, I've got to give you your homework. I am a true middle school teacher. The bell doesn't dismiss you, I dismiss you, and I'm going to assign your homework before I dismiss you. And your homework this week is to find an educator who, like me, has not seen all of the Marvel movies yet, and tell them to listen to the Educational Duct Tape podcast. Tell them, don't worry about those movies. They're overrated. Actually, they're pretty cool. Go listen to the Educational Duct Tape podcast instead. My family and I were partway through the movies. We were waiting until one of our kids was old enough to watch them. Two of our kids still, we don't think, are old enough to watch them, but we're going very slowly through them. We haven't finished them yet. So find an educator friend who has not seen all of the Marvel movies yet and tell them, hey, instead of checking out those Marvel movies, go check out the Educational Duct Tape podcast. So that does it for today's episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please tell a friend, tell a colleague that's more of an acquaintance than a friend, tell an enemy, or share about it with the hashtag #EduDuctTape on social media. And if you really liked it, please consider rating the show on Apple Podcasts. Check the show notes for details about signing up for my newsletter, joining the Duct Tapers Facebook group, inquiring about having me work with you or your team of educators, getting some podcast stickers, and more. Thanks for all that you do as a listener, as a lifelong learner, and as an educator. Have a great day, and I will see you in a fortnight or so.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please consider rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app. #EduDuctTape.
Did you know that 3-time educational duct tape guest, Shooks and Gift, the podcast co-host, Shake Up Learning trainer, and Google innovator Jen Giffen created a set of sketch notes based on the chapters of my book, Educational Duct Tape and EdTech Integration Mindset? If you haven't seen Sketchnote Jake yet, or Sketchy Jake as somebody called him recently, you are missing out. But you won't only enjoy my plaid shirt and stick figure arms, you'll also enjoy the way she shares key lessons, quotes, and takeaways in these formats. Head over to jakemiller.net and search for Sketchnote to see those sketch notes for yourself.